In this segment, we're going to discuss the features of the switch specifically that works on the drop pump control. We're going to focus in on just the mechanical and unique features of the switch itself, and in another segment we'll discuss all the drop connectivity. We start off in this application and we've designed this switch of a high impact plastic that's UL rated for 3R, which means that we can run it indoor or outdoor. It has the touch control on the front that interfaces with the drop modules that you can actually use to turn the pump on and off right on the outside of the module. This comes in handy when you're trying to troubleshoot a system and you want to make sure that the electrical components are working, but you aren't necessarily sure how the pressure components are working. So in this case, I turned it back on. This one also has hooked to it the leak detection probe, which when it's used in how it's designed to be, you can see that this would trigger all the water well power to shut off so that you could protect the mechanical room with that. In this application, we are showing a UFNM style cable, which you might or might not see, but it would be the same if we looked at an MC or a rigid conduit. And the main feature that this has with regard to the electrical connections is that it has this built-in union connection that houses the pressure transducer, which will allow the switch to be lifted completely up vertically if you would have a plug in the pressure sensing level. So without having to unwire the unit, you could pull it loose, service the pressure device, which I'll turn to the camera here and show you. And so this is a pressure sensing element that we make at CSI. It's totally designed for this system and it's completely serviceable. So just as quickly as releasing that union nut, you can get to the pressure transducer. And one of the reasons this is important is any pressure switch, the sensing connector here would tend to potentially over time plug up. And when these plug up with iron, calcium, debris, you would, in any other pressure switch, you would be forced to try to unwire it and rotate the switch off the nipple. In this case, you just merely release the union and pull it straight up. So we think that's a really neat service item feature that every contractor can enjoy. The other thing then, when you raise the hood on this little guy, we've used wire tails for the connectors instead of small terminal blocks. And anybody that's ever put something like this in realizes the benefit of that. You may have a wire gauge going to your motor that's a heavier wire gauge than the terminal blocks would be made for. And in this case, you can just merely use a twist lock to connect it up. So if you had a big offset and you had to run an 8-gauge wire, for example, you could bring it in here and make it up in this under the hood and have plenty of room to work with. If you just had one of the typical switches with mounting screws in it, or load screws and line screws, then you're really restricted at how you can make those connections up. So we think that's a big feature. We also built this unit with a Nema Contactor as opposed to an electronic pressure switch. And what that means is the mechanical contactor is very similar to a standard pressure switch that you might see on a well pump, in that I've seen a lot of service guys, the first thing they would do is mechanically push the pressure switch in to see if they're getting motor current. And unlike an electronic switch, we can merely do the same thing by actuating the contactor here mechanically. So when you step up to this unit to service it, you can just quickly push the contactor in and observe if the pump is running and watch the pressure come up and so on. Then you've isolated that the problem could be in pressure sensing. So we think that's a big feature. That has a 1,000,000 cycle capability because it's NEMA rated. Actually, it's millions of cycles, as opposed to an electronic switch, where an electronic switch can be troublesome for troubleshooting. It will leak current all the time. The contractor or the installer or the service tech doesn't really know if it's made or not made because you have no visual evidence that the switch is made. So this is really a superior way to do a motor control, as opposed to, I believe, any other similar product out there uses an electronic switch. So the mechanical switch in this is a big serviceable feature. And we kind of are proud in the fact that every element of this thing is a long-term performer for you. It's not a throwaway by any means. You can simply clean this, you can replace the transducer, the contactor could be replaced. So this is a product that's designed to go the long haul. It's not a short-term retail product. Another feature that we've built into this that's really unique is that it has the ability to put a flow meter in it. So if you're wanting to see what's happening in your home, whether it's a leak that comes on the network through a leak detector, or if it's a high flow, this expansion flow meter is available to plug in. And so not only do you have the benefit of watching for a broken plumbing line or a leaky toilet through this flow meter, you also get the benefit of being able to connect it further away. So we make these cables, we can extend them out, and you can place this wherever you need to in the plumbing, and it becomes a really unique part of the system where your pressure switch actually has flow indications in it. We're going to go through a really good, proper procedure in installing it. While I have it in my hand, I want to show the transducer. So this is the pressure transducer. Like I said, we make the whole thing at CSI. It's a pressure-sensitive electronic chip, and then we wrap it in silicone and seal it off with an elastomer diaphragm. So it's completely protected from any of the contamination in the water. I know there are some transducers out there that just take the water directly to the transducer, and it's important that you see that not only is it serviceable and replaceable, but we build it at a very high standard to protect it from the elements. The next thing we do when you pull it out of the box is you take the cover off, and the cover is 2 screws, and then it unlatches off the back, and you'll see the wire tails as we talked earlier, and the wire tails then are just at a standard length so that you can put a pre-knocked out hole. So you put a connector in there for whatever your wiring means is, whether it's conduit, NM, UL, whatever. You would put your connector in, and then you feed your wire. Obviously, you feed your wire through that connector. The point is, you don't have to drill any holes. You don't have to do a knockout. The connectors are already there. The next thing you would do is, because you don't have to worry about spinning this, you put the stem in, the pressure sensing stem in, on its stainless steel base, and you don't want to forget putting the nut on first, because then you have to take it off. I did that just to show you that you don't want to do that. So once this is properly installed and sealed, then you can simply just plug this back down on. Then you would bring your wires in from the side, make it up, and it was, as we talked earlier as well, because you may have to be concerned with a voltage drop and a long run to the motor, you can bring a nice size gauge wire through here and not have to fight very tiny little terminal strips like you might find in other devices. So the installation is just that simple. You tighten up your union nut hand tight. So this comes up completely. There's a lot of threads on it because of the force that it sees. We put a lot of threads on the nut. And you tighten that up hand tight, and you're good to go. And you'll notice it could swivel if you need to. No problem, because it's on an annular O-ring. Something we're very proud of about this switch is it's entirely made in the United States and mostly in Ashland, Ohio. It was completely designed by the engineering team at CSI in Ashland, Ohio. All the electronics are made in Ohio. The injection molding is molded in Ohio off of our tools. So every element of this is a U.S. product. So for the long term, that means that you can contact us and we've got the answers.